Usually, whenever I come here to make a rant, it's usually about experiences I've had with other people and things that they do that I think will thwart their opportunity for long term business growth and sales in the future. Well, today, I'm about to flip the script and air some of my dirty laundry. So, today's rant is about me and a terrible mistake. Okay, maybe not so terrible. By the time I get to the end of the story, I guess you'll judge for yourself whether the mistake was critical to my long-term success or not. But yeah, it was a silly mistake that I shouldn't make, especially since I have a podcast talking about these sorts of things. But anyway, that's just the nature of life in general. You might know the gospel, you might preach the gospel. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to do the gospel or live the gospel. Anyway, so now to my personal rant. I have this long-term client, if you could call it that. It's not exactly a long-term client because it's an NGO. It's the British Council. They do lots of good work here in Nigeria in the educational space, all sorts of things, education, business education, and the promotion of skills acquisition for youth, the disabled, on and on. They really do loads of things. Now, for an NGO of that nature, they have multiple teams. So because of that, they have a decentralized project management structure, more or less. So you have hundreds of people running different projects all over the country. And so that's the reason why I can't say they're my long-time client, because really, I've not worked with the British Council in itself as a legal entity, but more or less those, multiple decentralized teams that run around here or there and do really interesting projects. So one of those projects was for a Kalma project. That's Kalma. I'm sure some of you have heard about it in the news. That's if there are any of you here who still read newspapers. I don't. I catch some news on TV and, what pops up on social media. But for those of you who are into heavily reading newspapers every day, that's Nigerians, I assume. I'm sure you've heard about the Kalma project. It's a language and math accelerator initiative in Kano. Really, really interesting work. Anyway, so because the program has been rolled out recently, I think maybe last year or so, I'm just guessing, but last year was the first time that I heard about it. And there were new sub-initiatives within the project. And so emails sent out, that's for those of us who are registered vendors and who are in the know, emails were sent out. And of course, that jump-started the whole process more or less. And new negotiations with this new team who is handling this specific phase of the Kalma project. And so that's how things work pretty much with the British Council. So because there are multiple teams, you have to put in a specific bid each time there is a job, and so you don't have rolling payment terms. So the sort of thing that you would negotiate with, let's say Zenith Bank, for instance, that let's say you're a wedding planner who is trying to dabble into the training space. You reach an arrangement with Zenith Bank that, okay, for staff trainings of this size for 2 days, I'm going to do it at a flat rate of so and so. And that saves you the hassle of having to negotiate each time. You just have, you fix the amount, and basically you guys just keep rolling it over and over and over until the day when either it's not satisfactory for either of you, and then you renegotiate again. So we can't really have that sort of thing with the British Council because there are multiple teams, different projects, different specifications. So you have to negotiate things afresh, with each bid. So it's just part of the nature of the beast. So if you're going to do work with these sorts of people, the British Council, also done some stuff with the High Commission, and I also put in a bid for I can't remember the country. Well, it's one of those European countries anyway that has an embassy in Abuja. I put in a bid for that, but that didn't work. Anyway, so back to the story. Before I continue, I know that this is not wedding related. However, I think there are lessons that we can learn here and tie into our wedding practice, because the chief principle that I'm going to pull out of all of this is that you shouldn't make decisions for customers and clients. A lot of us do that when we are negotiating. We make a lot of assumptions and we start negotiating and start making decisions on their behalf. And this is something that you should stop. So even though this example is from the NGO space, it applies to we wedding professionals, because it's something that I'm sure one or two of you have done in the recent past. Okay, so where are we? So the Calma project is a language and math accelerator initiative in Kano. Really interesting work and really good work, beneficial work, because you have a lot of underserved communities when it comes to these sorts of things, to education. And the reason why I know that firsthand was because I had my NYSC in Kano. That's my National Youth Service Corps. I did it in Kano. The village that I was attached to was Rano local government. And so being that I had my academic background was in the law, I ended up being a teacher in English and literature. And it was an interesting experience, because first of all, there are a lot of these communities up north where people don't speak English or functional English. And so you have them in secondary schools trying to learn complex subjects like physics, chemistry, literary appreciation, those sorts of things, and they don't have the rudiments of English tied down. And so some of us flow into these communities with very little knowledge of Hausa, and let's just say it's not a very productive mix, because you have me standing in front of the class. I have no understanding of the Hausa language. I try to get people to translate every now and then, but let's just say it was not time well spent. Let me put it that way. So when you have people like this, the British Council coming into these regions with these sorts of initiatives, the Language and Math Accelerator, getting our kids up north to learn more math and improve their language skills. It's a really good initiative to get these people, how will I put it, to bring them up to snuff, to make sure that they, I'm trying to sound politically correct. I don't want to ruffle too many feathers. Well, anyway, just to make sure that we get everybody all up on the same level, and we get the youth integrated and on board, not just in their personal development, but in national development as a whole. Because we're not going to make progress as a country if we can't get everybody on board, and our best resource, which is our how do I put it, manpower, our human talent. Let me just put it that way. So anyway, so the Calma project, like I mentioned, this thing was going on in Kano, in different local governments there. And since I'm based in Abuja, that basically means that this was off-site work. Now, this is where I started going off the rails. Now, because it was off-site, my assumption was that if I was going to fulfill this myself, then the costs were going to be high, and I was now going to be uncompetitive. Having worked with different British Council teams for a while, I've gotten a sense of which teams are price sensitive and which teams are not. But for some reason, I just assumed that cost was going to be an issue here, because they work with sometimes they have an RFP process. That's what's it called? I think a request for proposal or something like that. So yeah, they just send out an RFP, request for proposal. You guys send in your tenders, you send in your bids, and then they sit down and then they select. So typically, ways that I've tried to get around that in the past has been whenever I'm on a job, I try to get everybody's contact details. I try to do good follow up with all the teams. So chances are, especially now, that whenever I get a bid, I can recognize somebody's name from the email, someone I've worked with in the past, and I can call up and get conversations going there. So I can call up for more information before I put in the bid. So of course, I called the lady who was a member of the team, someone that I had worked with years prior. Luckily, I'd still kept in touch. And so we got some good rapport going, got details, and I sent in the bid. But the fundamental assumption that I made was that I wouldn't be price competitive since it was offsite. So I decided to use one of my associates based in Kano, because my aim was to cut cost. That was my aim, to cut cost and be competitive using my associates on the ground. Madugu Photography, someone that real good dude, professional associate. So I knew that with him in the field and with me, us liaising back and forth and closely monitoring the specs and the artistic direction of the work, I knew that everything was going to be handled quite well. So that was the aim, to cut costs. Madugu was on board, and so we put forward the proposal. Now, my contact in the British Council, she calls me back and she said, pretty much she noticed that I didn't quote for room and board. Basically, that's hotel food and those sorts of things. And my response was to basically just go over the proposal and then justify the arrangements that I had come up with to lower cost. Now, that was a fundamental mistake. At the time, I didn't quite realize, but in later phone calls with her after the project had been awarded to someone else, I realized that that was the problem. Now, because I tried to involve an external associate, there's something that we need to understand about our customers, whether they be NGOs or brides and grooms for weddings. When people are negotiating with us, money is not just an issue. There's also the issue of risk that is involved. Our customers are trying to mitigate risk as much as possible. So since she's worked with me in the past, a couple of people have worked with me in the past, they are comfortable with the deliverables, and so I've built some credibility with them and with different teams. But now, when I introduce a new associate into the mix who's going to be on ground, even though I'm going to do the remote supervising to make sure everything is going according to plan, that gets some antennas ruffled, and they're worried about risk and compromise on the job. And so that's something we also have to bear in mind when negotiating with our brides and grooms. They're not just worried about the money, they're also worried about risk in delivery of the product and things of that nature. Okay, so like I said, my response to the phone call was to justify arrangements on why I was putting this forward to lower the cost. Now, the proper response, for those of you who've been following on the podcast and who are trying to up their sales game, you realize that the proper thing I should have done was to have asked questions about the budget scope first. Because if you have a champion or an inside person and then the person calls back and says, "Oh, I noticed you didn't put any padding for room and board. How are you going to sort that out?" Then, if you've got a good, nice conversational relationship flowing with that person, the questions that you should ask should be around the scope of the budget. So like, "Oh, okay. Well, the reason why I did that was to keep figures down. So has the budget the budget has been approved? I mean, do you think it's big enough to accommodate X amount for room and board?" Me and her were cool like that I could come out that way and ask that question. So those are the sorts of questions that I should have asked. Questions about the scope of the budget first and foremost. And in asking those questions, and also to determine what they were, in asking this kind of question about budget scope and then trying to feel her out in the conversation, I would have gotten a sense of what was most important, price or confidence in the deliverables. It's not either or. It's a sliding scale where, on average, each of our clients is trying to manage both of them. But bottom line is, whatever question that I could have come up with, or assuming you were in that situation, the appropriate thing to do was not to start making arguments to justify the arrangements and how it would lower cost, but to ask questions to see how significant the budget is in the first place. Now, the reason why I know that this was the critical turning point in the whole negotiation, at least for me, was because after the contract was awarded and everything got underway, I still kept in touch. I wanted to be sure that whoever it is that they went with, they were well taken care of. And also, since I hadn't done any work on the Karma project before, I'd done some other work with the Commonwealth teams and some other teams. So I also wanted to have a look at the deliverables that were given so I could get a sense of the kind of deliverables that I expected for this kind of field work. So in keeping in touch and asking questions, like I said, me and her are really cool now, real conversational. I asked the question and she came up front. The reason why they went with someone else, they were not comfortable that I was trying to, I can't remember the exact word that they used. I think the word she used was subcontract, I think. Yeah, that they were not comfortable that I was trying to subcontract it to someone else. And so they just went with another vendor. So what's the moral of the story? Moral of the story, and what we can learn as wedding professionals, is let's stop assuming and making decisions for our customers and clients when we're in the sales process and when we are negotiating. I just assumed that budget was absolutely critical and they would like to keep it as bare bones as possible. I shouldn't have assumed. I should have asked. So ask questions, don't assume. Then the second moral of the story, the part that I got right, customer service and follow-up questions are essential, whether you get the deal or not. A lot of people are very good on their follow-up game, on their customer service game, only when they get the deal. You also should have a customer service script, a follow-up script, even in instances when you didn't get the deal. So before, early on in my career as a photographer, the basic thing I would do was I would say, oh, okay, you went with so for wedding photography. No wahala, no problem. Could I ask you a couple of questions? Just to help me improve my business in the future. And of course, typically the bride will say, hey, yeah, sure, ask. And I'll go ahead and ask questions, basically to delve into why we lost the gig, what we could have done to make things better. It's not because I'm trying to rescue the situation and pull the wedding away from the other photographer, but sometimes from these conversations you get valuable insight that if you take the lessons learned and plug it into your sales process, it makes you better for the future. So come up with your own. Just make sure your customer service game is strong, whether you get the deal or you don't. So if you get the deal, call up to be sure that they're happy and push further. If you don't get the deal, call up and find out why they weren't happy and what you could do to get better. And then I guess the final part of this, of the moral of the story, is to practice what you preach, because practicing what you preach is hard. So I spend a lot of time talking about these sorts of things, sales, customer service, negotiations, professionalism, these sorts of things to different people. I started off doing this with my friend Laura of Posh and Pristine Events, talking about these sorts of things to people who are interested in joining the wedding space, particularly wedding planners. So I spend a lot of time talking about these sorts of things to people in groups and then in private. And so it sparks of hypocrisy or negligence when I find myself not doing the basic stuff that I tell everybody else that they should do. So practice what you preach and be vigilant. Be vigilant, basically. So that's it. So that's my rant for today. and I tried to answer the question why you should stop making decisions for your customers and your clients. And so that's my rant for today. And like my wife pointed out a while ago, what's that saying? Is it assumptions make an ass out of you and me? And this is just one of those situations. I assumed that that the budget was the critical element and I wanted to keep things close to the floor, but apparently not. I should have asked questions. The good thing is, since I have a customer service and follow-up script, I now know that I'm back in the loop because they're willing to keep me updated on future phases of the program. And of course, I've extracted a soft commitment that I would be put in the loop for future phases of the rollout of the Calma project. So if I do get back in the loop with this team, I'll be sure to let you guys know. Also, so that you can see live and firsthand how some of these principles, ideas, and practices play out for real. So that's it. Sorry that this is not a wedding related example, but I'm sure that you guys can learn from it. You can apply it to your wedding practice. And then I've noticed that a lot of us in the wedding space don't strictly do only weddings per se. So for those of you who are dipping out into other things, maybe who also do NGO work and corporate stuff like I do, then this will be valuable insights that you can take into other aspects of your business. So thank you very much, guys, for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based photographer Tavishima Ayede. Thank you guys very much for listening. I appreciate your time and attention, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.